The Partnership for the Delaware Estuary presents its 2011 Science and Environmental Summit. This program was recorded January 31st, 2011, in Cape May, New Jersey. In this program, producing audio and video for the web with Whitney Hoffman, CEO of Hoffman Digital Media. At the lectern to introduce Whitney is Dee Ross from the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary.
Whitney Hoffman, CEO of Hoffman Digital Media. She has worked with new and social media for the past 5 years in content production and organizing digital media conferences. So please welcome Whitney Hoffman.
Sorry, I'm going to speak back because I got one more employee in my to bring out. So I apologize for that, as you get to watch me rummage in my bag. But as you can see, Steve is basically trying to run a TV show here and can do it mobily because there's equipment that you can just use everywhere now. And there are things like this. This is this is the H1 Zoom recorder. And it looks really kind of strange, but this is a very powerful digital recorder that you can record like 23 hours worth of audio on it. It can be in your hand. You can have a whole podcasting studio right in your pocket. And so there's a lot of ways you can really start producing great content for the web with really low-cost tools and things that you can carry around that can be incredibly mobile. So for those of you that are out working in the field, want to capture sound, let's say, of birds or water or people working on projects or whatever else, there's a lot of this stuff that you guys can do on the fly and cost effectively. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. But before we talk about anything else, we need to talk content creation strategy. So what we'll cover today is we're going to talk about content creation and the management of it for the web, simple tools you can use to make your life a whole lot easier, and using content to gain attention and leverage your expertise. I come to all of this from starting a podcast all about learning and learning disabilities. And I did this because I was running the community education program at the Centerville School, which is a school for kids with language-based learning disabilities in Delaware. And we were finding that a lot of the parents were having a really hard time sessions. And I had just gotten my first iPod and I found out there are these things called podcasts. And talking about business, and they're talking, there's iTunes U where you can get courses from MIT downloaded that you can listen to while you're on your commute, and it was fantastic. And I figured if we could get this same sort of information up there and do it in a way that people could access it when it was convenient for them, rather than necessarily being in the room at the same time, that would really be optimal for people to get the information across. So it became really exciting on how to do this, and if I can figure out how to do this, you guys can certainly figure out how to do this. It really doesn't require anything other than a slight MacGyver attitude. Have duct tapes and safety pins and we'll get it all done. So content rules. This actually is a new book out by my friend CC Chapman and Ann Handley, who runs Marketing Profs up in Boston, how to create killer blogs, podcasts, videos, ebooks, and webinars. It really is incredibly important to create quality content for the web. Let's just talk about audio for a second. Nobody necessarily wants to listen to crappy audio if you're going to have to put it in headphones in your ear. I am willing to put up with a lot of different stuff if I'm listening to it in the web because it's not being piped straight into my head. If somebody is constantly doing that, there is not very long I'm going to listen to that show before I am going to hang up on it because you just can't deal with it. So you don't necessarily always have to sound like NPR either. There's some room in between there. So don't look at every project that we're going to talk about or creating content in the web that it necessarily has to look like it just came right off of CNN or it just came right off of National Public Radio or anything else. You can create stuff on your own terms that are perfectly great at getting your message across and perfectly great quality with relatively cheap tools. Creating great content is about making sure that you're appealing to your intended audience. You want to make sure that you're giving them value and that you keep them coming back for more. If you know why people are going to your website, if they're looking for specific information, if they're looking for information on the horseshoe crab count, if they're looking for information on different events that you're hosting or other things, make sure that they can find it. Make sure that you're giving them as accurate information as you can and making it easy for them to find it. If you're not updating your website or you're not putting up new content very often, people are not going to come back very often. So making sure that you're using any content that you're basing on the web, make sure it's focused towards the audience that you want, that you're providing them value, and that you make it so they want to keep coming back for more and re-engaging. Your content's important for you because it's available 24/7. Even when you've closed the doors, even on weekends, everywhere, it's available then. One of the great things is starting the LD podcast. I did over 107 episodes and it's sort of been on hiatus for about the past year, but I still have people contacting me because they're just finding it for the first time, because that content is still living out there. And what's funny is as more people have broadband and stuff at home, and more people have iPods, more people have iPads and are looking for content, the audience for things just keeps on going up and up. So whatever you put on, you're creating a tale that they can find. You might have produced it a year ago, but it still has value to people that need that piece of information now. Obviously, if it's time sensitive and your event's over, that doesn't help you much. But I mean, it's things like, what are you doing in the estuary? That information is still important even after you've put it up. You're also giving people a threshold experience when you're creating any sort of content for the web. If you walk into a doctor's office and it looks like, what I used to call a shed in Dixie County, a tin roof shack, and the magazines are only 12 years out of date and stuff like that, you're going to start questioning what that doctor is doing. Moreover, if his receptionist is sitting there smacking gum, not paying very much attention to you, even when you go back and see him, he could be, a Mayo Clinic doctor and the best guy in the world, but you will think less of him because he apparently has absolutely no taste in office staff. So, the threshold experiences when you first interact with somebody are really, really important, and it tells a lot about you. The web-based content that you're going to produce is going to help build your reputation, and it's going to help create resources for people, and it's a great opportunity to manage expectations on what you think that they should know about you and what to expect from you. Everything. If you're not ready to do that, but you have specific things you want to offer them, list the specific things, and that can be really helpful. So where do you need to start with this? Does everybody have a website? Who's in here? Who does not have their own website? Well, okay, who has a personal website or a blog? Okay, one or two people. Who helps deal with the web-based content that they have for their organization? Okay, so pretty much everybody else. So you guys have at least access to a website. Do you guys do the web design and production and stuff in-house, or do you have it done out of house? How many people have it done in-house? Okay, and everybody else, how many people do it out of house? Okay, a good portion. With something easy like a blog, that's something that's probably easy enough for you to manage. Even if somebody else is doing your website, you can add that onto your website, or you can even use something as easy as blogger.com or wordpress.com to set up a blog. A blog, again, is a lightweight website that you can use. It's a great way to post lots of information and also host audio and video and any other content you put on there. And because it's lightweight and it's like publishing your own opinion piece or your own newspaper all the time, it's very easy for you to do. I know that there are some small businesses that sometimes pay up to $750 to get their website updated. And as far as I'm concerned, since a blog basically can be close to free except for web hosting, that seems criminal to me, particularly for public organizations. So the easier and the more regularly you can post to your website without paying somebody $1 gazillion to do it, the better off it is. You should have an idea of why you'd like to use audio or video or create any content, frankly, for the web. What do you have to say? You've got to be able to tell a really compelling story. It's got to be about good communications first, and really a lot of it's just good public relations when it comes right down to it. There are other lightweight blogs like Posterius. It's a quick blog where you can even email things and it will post it up for you. It doesn't really let you have your own domain name, which is like www.whitneyhoffman.com. That's my domain. That way, anything that I post there and anything that anybody's searching for and that I tag on a blog post or anything else, when people are looking for me or they're looking for that information, they come to my website. They don't necessarily go anywhere else. You want to have as much control and be as authoritative as possible. Tumblr is also a very quick, lightweight blogger, and WordPress, which we talked about a little bit. I think the key to any of the content that you create, again, is this concept of threshold experience. So let's talk about this for a little bit. I saw this great book, and I had to take a picture of it, The Language of Doors, because I think when you're looking at something from the outside, it can make a really big difference on how you view what's going to happen on the inside. Okay. It's the hum.
Cool. He's making a hum.
Ground bloop.
Yeah, somewhere.
Technical difficulties. So, okay. One of those things you get used to and incredibly sensitive to when you start producing audio is all the little subtle hums the equipment makes. So anyway, so the threshold experience, you tell a lot from the doors that go in. Just like we judge books by the cover, we're also going to judge your website by the cover. We're going to judge it by what it looks like and how easy it is to navigate. So this is actually a picture of a school, but because you've got a pterodactyl before you go in, you know that there's something going to be interesting going on at this school. This is not going to be your average elementary school by any stretch of the imagination, because how many buildings do you know have pterodactyls on the outside of it? Likewise, this is pictures of different buildings. If you go to the White House, you've got a certain sense of what you're going to expect there. Inside a church, you're expecting a whole different experience based on that. Tech superpowers. This is probably going to be a great place to go to get your computer repaired. That's actually in Boston. This is in Barcelona. I couldn't believe that they actually had a sign that said Happy Pills on it. So it turns out it's a candy store, but it was just one of those things where I figured that was the great sign, and I would have at least 4 or 5 different blog posts off of that sign alone. So now here's a picture of my younger son, but you can see there's many faces of him, and you find out a lot about him. Each little blog post, each little information, each little picture tells you a little bit more about this kid. Are you going to have the snarky kid, the studious kid, the one who's getting ready to pout here, somebody who's proud of themselves, somebody who's outraged, somebody who's annoyed because his mother's taking yet another picture? There's many different faces of yourself that can be your experience, because if you meet this kid, you're not necessarily sure that it's that same kid too. And depending on what you have as your experience, both on the web, the different pieces you put out, all of those things are going to add up collectively to what people think about you. The people who really know about threshold experiences, this is the picture that we took when we went to Universal, and that's Harry Potter, Land of Adventure or whatever at Universal. They made us walk all the way through the park before you even get in here. They make you take the long way around, so it's all about the build and the anticipation. And then eventually you see this on a vista above. So it's all about, I see that looks like that's going to be totally the most awesome thing ever, particularly when you've been walking through torrential rain. But it's all about the build and the anticipation, and also putting your best foot forward and making sure that people really want to engage in your content. One of the best books out there, if you ever do any PR, any marketing of any sort, that you really should read if you haven't, is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. They also have a great website with lots of resources online. It's all about how to make your messages sticky and easy to remember. They have great examples, particularly about fundraising letters in the book. They're just fantastic. And we'll go through the steps of how to make things sticky in just a minute. But one of the most important things is you want to make sure that people are going to remember your stories and be able to carry them along and pass them forward. So, with all of this content, you want to keep it simple. You don't want to have 45 different messages in there. You just want to do one. Break things down into simple pieces. Look at things. If you've got 4 different things you want to say, sometimes maybe you want to do 4 different podcasts or 4 different videos or 4 different blog posts. Keep it as simple and to the point as possible. If you can make it a surprise, that's great. There's lots of great stories about the Consumer Product Safety Commission did the whole thing about how theater popcorn, which looks really innocent. They've got a bucket of popcorn here, and then they have a steak and a fettuccine Alfredo next to it, and then they tell you that the amount of fat in the popcorn is double that of the fettuccine Alfredo. You know, that is a surprise, but because it's a surprise, it's unexpected, and they demonstrated it, that I will never forget, because it's one of those incredibly vivid messages that you just really see. Concrete, again, it's making it tangible. By seeing the fettuccine to the popcorn, you get that visual picture right away, and you know what that's about. Credible means being an authority. You guys all have that in spades. You have science on your side, you have government on your side, and everything else. Make sure you use your authority to the max. You have statistics and numbers to make sure that it doesn't get overly analytical, because you want to make sure that it's emotional. You want to make me care. We all approach every experience that we go to in life with what's in it for me. Don't tell people why they should care and why they should engage. You know, why you guys should be in this room listening to me. If I don't make it worth your while, you're going to feel like, well, gee, that's, you know, another 45 minutes of my life I can't get back, and I don't want you to leave this room feeling that. So part of it is, in any story that you're going to tell, you have to make people care. And tell a great story. And there are lots of great stories. We talked about this a little bit at the end of last session, you know, whether it's talking about rain gardens, or it's talking about the green roofs that are going on, or even, you know, there was a really great story that they were talking about at lunch that had to do with the counting of the horseshoe crabs, and how easy it was to get people to work on the horseshoe crab project, how difficult it was, again, to work on some things like worms, because they just, you know, didn't have the same sex appeal. Somehow there's got to be a great story, because you guys are doing stuff that you care about every single day, but you have to make other people care about it. You know, my husband has to make me care at least a little bit when he comes home from work and he's exhausted about what happened during his day. He's an OBGYN, so unfortunately my kids hear more about circumcisions than everybody ever wanted to, but it does get their attention. So, you know, this is funny. I was going through the kids' school and I saw all these posts on there. Personal writing can be blog post and opinion. You know, your typical narrative writing is the about us or the press release or the news event. Narrative writing tends not to get a whole lot of attention most of the time, because it just tends to be like, and blah, 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 blah. You know, that's fine. This is the reason why newspapers have headlines too, is because everybody wants to read the sexy stuff first. You know, persuasive writing is what you're doing in grants and everything else, but it's also what you're doing in marketing. You know, and I learned this going to law school. You have to be able to make your case for why you're important all the time. And you have to know why you're important and be able to communicate that with other people. And you should be able to do that even when you're writing a press release. News article, whoops. And I'm getting my buttons confused. Expository writing is news articles. Descriptive writing is, again, setting the scene and making those more emotional attachments. That's particularly good when you're writing a fundraising letter. I'm going to care more about the birds and the turtles and the otters and everything else than I necessarily am about the government having a $22 million deficit this year and your funding's getting cut. That's true, and that's really important, and I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that there's budgetary issues, but people are going to care more about saving the birds in some ways than they necessarily are about the strict monetary problems. Because again, it's like, yeah, well, you know, I don't have as much money as I did last year, so move on. So people have very short and fickle attention spans. So all of these things apply to content. Is your content educational? Is it giving somebody some value? Is it promoting an event or an idea? Is it giving you news and information, or is it a blend? Can you make it edutainment? Can you make people care, and can you make it engaging? And this is when how many people were in the last session? Just so, okay, about half. So unfortunately you will get to sit through the video again. But here is Analtech, the company with the unfortunate name, and the even more fortunate logo to go along with it, that makes chromatography equipment. And they have done a really interesting job using video to blend what they do, both in terms of promotion and what they do in terms of advertisement and making people care. So, are you trying to play that, or you want me to? I'm trying to get to the next page, so then it will play, because the video should be on the next page.
Which video is it?
Do the first one again, because only half the people saw it. So, the CSI.
Yeah.
Because we have audio this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whoops.
Yeah, it's not connected into the thing. So
The CSI one first, or you can run either of them first.
CSI was the top one.
The top one.
The blue screen of death. Slightly better audio. So here's a real episode of CSI that is using their equipment. And they've done this and they've blended basically what's an advertisement and, a CSI episode at the same time and sort of made double use of this. So here's all the cool gear that they make. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
next one's much louder. This one just
Okay.
has a really soft soundtrack to it.
Yeah, it's just basically your soundtrack. She's looking at the different inks on this invoice and showing that basically somebody's forged it basically by looking at the difference in it through the thin layer chromatography. Now, I can tell you, I probably don't care much about thin layer chromatography, except, when you see this, you're like, all right, there's a gee whiz factor that I might actually care about. And CSA is kind of sexy, which makes me care a little bit more about Analtech rather than, the people that put out the signs on next to theirs on Halloween that say entrance in the back. So, and we'll see if we can do the second one. The second one's funny. They actually got Mike Castle and Rick Jensen from WDEL to participate in this next one.
Okay, 1 second.
Sure. Any more audio on this? Not really? It was loud before.
Good morning. What's that all about the statue of this? Newest invention?
I don't know
It
why.
is really loud.
You won't believe the value.
We swear it was really loud. All right, well, if it's not going to work, let's just blow it off. So, because sitting through a video that's sort of cute and entertaining and a Monty Python takeoff that is not going to make a whole lot of sense if you can't actually hear the audio, it makes no sense. Well, can you fast forward through it? I can see Mike at the end. Do you have control to fast forward?
Yeah, it's fast forwarding.
Okay, it's really right near the end. Ye old angry mob.
Towards the end.
Yeah, really towards the end, like the last scene.
Is he dressed up like a Renaissance man?
Yeah. It's also, okay, so this is very near the end. Whoops.
Too far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it's right after this. So here, and it's right after here, and here comes Mike Castle and Rick Jensen. So anyway, they got almost everybody, including a senator of the U.S., to show up for this goofy site and talk about the company briefly. So again, it's amazing what you can do and amazing where you can get buy-in from folks to do things. I bet if you approach even the congressman who is here this morning in the right bent to do the right thing for 5 minutes, he probably would do it. So in some ways, it's all about the approach. But having a sense of humor is amazing. There is a show run by a bunch of people from a health department out in the Midwest called the Midwest Teen Sex Show. And it's the most hysterical short video, basically, of, sex information for kids. And it's accurate, but each of them works like a Monty Python, really a Saturday Night Live skit. And they're hysterically funny. But, if you want to get the point across about safe sex and everything else and what you should do, this is probably the better way to reach people than necessarily drone them to death with, you could get syphilis. It'll be ugh. So there's better ways to say things. So let's talk about podcasting. Podcasting in general can be audio or video. I tend to think of it as audio. Some people used to call video podcasting, video casting. Anyway, production can be really simple and straightforward. You can throw up single shows, just like single YouTube videos, or you can make it episodic so there's something continuously coming all the time. If you're looking at doing a series, that's when you really want to make sure that you've got particularly audio or even your video show going through iTunes or something like that so people can download that, get it automatically all the time, and have it come to them. Again, subscription and RSS means that they've got auto access to the content, so that means every time I hook up my iPod to my computer and everything, I get all of these new podcasts and all the latest episodes, and I don't have to go and hunt them out at different people's website. So if you're going to do a series or anything, make sure that you use a lot of those things. We'll talk about audio podcasts first. Audio or video? Why do you want to use one over the other? There is a very big difference between hearing and seeing and having to do both at the same time. Sometimes if you've got a video podcast that is nothing but, well, again, this is great that somebody gets to see me like this. If I'm just interviewing somebody, they'll probably get as much out of the audio while they're driving in the car than they necessarily will just seeing me talk. You know, I admit I can be entertaining from sometimes, but on the whole, you really don't need to see me all the time to get the gist of everything that I'm saying. So consider, do people need to hear things and see things at the same time? Because video, while I love it and everything, it takes a lot longer and it takes more of my attention. So I can get a lot of information from audiobooks and everything, driving in the car, during my commute and whatever, and it doesn't require me to watch it at the same time. But if there's things that you really need to show me, like the condition of the waterways and whatever, you're going to want to use video a good portion of the time, because that may make a stronger impression than just telling me about it. So think about whether or not I need to see it or hear it, or do I need to do both at the same time when you're looking at whether or not you want to do video or audio production. Outline your story or the series. What kind of story do you want to get across, and what do you want to tell? You know, can you step it up over different episodes? Do you want to have self-contained episodes that, if you're going to do a series, where each one can be listened to individually, sort of like This American Life, got kind of the same theme and the same setup, but each individual episode is essentially a collection of different stories? Or are you trying to tell one big story, but you're telling it in small little pieces? Are you going to do an interview format? Listening to people talk back and forth is incredibly engaging a lot of the time. I will listen to things, this is the reason why people listen to talk radio all the time. We want to hear each other, and we want to hear people going back and forth and listening to stories. I decided to go with an interview format for my podcast because I thought that, sometimes if you get the impression like you're overhearing a conversation between friends, that can be something that really drives a message home and makes something really very personal. So think about that, and think about, the goals and the structure for what you want to do. Recording. Just like in this room, there's some background noise, like I can hear the people next door and I can hear people clanking in the kitchen and stuff. How much of that can you get rid of if you're going to record something? Or do you want that ambient sound because it gives you the sense of really being somewhere? If I'm going to record outside or in nature, or on the beach, I'm going to want the sound of the ocean there. I'm not necessarily going to want to edit that out. But there are other times that, there's traffic going by, and that's going to be something that you're going to have to try and fix if you want to fix in the editing process, and that can be a problem. There's something about the distance from the mic. And we all know this because everybody has experience with the Doppler effect, right? Where things go, meow. The same thing. If you're far away from the mic, the voices are softer. If you're close up to the mic, that's great. If you're eating the mic, it's not so good either. So, and when you're recording stuff, the first thing that everybody wants to do is just have the mic straight up in their face. That is not very good for sound quality. The other thing is to, if you can, this is a portable H2 Zoom recorder, which costs about $200. It runs on little SD cards underneath, so anything that runs in your camera. So these are dirt cheap. They're even $5 at Five Below. You can fit a ton of audio on here. This is great because you can change where the microphones are. So you can have it all on one side, all on the other, or you can be recording through both sides at once. It's particularly good if you're recording, let's say, a meeting that you're going to, or an interview between two people, because you can set it down on the table and you can have a conversation without everybody staring at the microphone. If you've ever seen reporters going out and doing man-on-the-street interviews, first thing that happens sometimes is somebody sticks a microphone in somebody's face, and the other person goes, they just dope freeze. Unless you're in Washington, in which case everybody's tumbling over themselves to see who can get to the microphone and the camera first. But I think that's the exception to the rule. So a lot of people get mic fright. So even if you're doing this for the first time, get used to it. It's not going to hurt you, and you rapidly get over the fact that you think your voice sounds weird. Think about the tone of different voices. Some people speak very loudly and project really well, and other people are very soft-spoken. So that can make a difference too. There's a tool called the Levelator, which you can download for free online, and I've got that as part of the PDF handouts you can find on my website, which will help equalize those two voices afterwards, so it doesn't sound like somebody's whispering and somebody's shouting, because that can be an issue. Recording in MP3, which is the common format for the web, it's also a tinier file in terms of overall size, is great. Or you can record in WAV, which is a slightly wider file. It's got more data in it, so it's essentially a bigger file, but you can record less of it. So I could probably get, on an average SD card that I have in here, like 23 hours worth of audio if I'm recording in MP3, or like 3 or 4 if I'm recording in WAV. So that can make a difference if you're doing stuff in the field. The other thing that can make a difference is that you don't want half of things recorded in WAV and half of the things recorded in MP3 if you're going to do two different types of sounds, because then you will get the Alvin and the Chipmunks effect when you're trying to mush it together. And all of a sudden one person sounds like this, and the other person sounds like they're on Quaaludes. Yeah, it's not good. So it's really a bad scene. So just make sure if you're recording different things and want to mix them together, they're in the right audio format, because otherwise it's a nightmare. Choosing a microphone. There are tons of microphones. These things, it can be really easy. Almost everybody has one of these sort of generic microphones hanging around the office or the classroom or something else. This has an XLR input, which just means there's three little dots at the bottom. This is great. We've got a lot of these sorts of mics and stuff around. If it's omnidirectional, it means they would hear you as loud as they would hear me, unless I'm eating the microphone like this, in which case then you get a more direct sound. These are good for in the field when you're trying to go back and forth. A lot of the times, though, they're really noisy because you get the rest of the sound from everything around it. These other shapes, cardioid and everything else, will give you an opportunity to get just better sound. That's why sometimes for portable devices, things like these little digital recorders are actually brilliant, because you can control which microphone is on and which one isn't. So if you're going to do field work or anything else, this is easy and cheap, and it's got the recording unit already in it. If you've got these big microphones hanging around, for about $29, there's this thing called the Icicle, where you can take those mics and turn them into USB mics. So basically you just put this thing in, you plug the XLR mic in there, you plug this into your computer, and you are ready to go and ready to roll for recording sound straight into your computer. Another thing, particularly for doing a single voice, that some people like is these Yeti microphones. They're made by these same people that make these big things called a snowball mic, which you may see at the Mac store, which looks like somebody put a big snowball basically on your desk. These have really great sound, and they're also USB, so you can record straight into your computer and get really good sound. It makes you feel kind of important, because it makes you feel like you're playing Larry King. But that's basically what you need to think about in terms of audio recording quality, and make sure you're matching that up for what you're trying to do. The Levelator, again, will correct those uneven voice levels. There are other post-production things you can use, like Sound Soap and other things. Correcting bad audio afterwards is a headache. And it's something that I actually, it can take so much time, and sometimes you can't get it right. So the best thing to do is try not to get bad audio in the first place. Try and get it as clear as possible the first time, because trying to remove things, even when you can do it, takes a long time, and it can be incredibly difficult. So we talked a little bit about the gear, and I kind of gave you the demo. There's lots of cheap and portable ways to do this. You can obviously record straight into here, or you can record straight into your computer. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff? Am I getting too technical and too geeky? Do you want more surface stuff, or where are we? I'm doing the thumbs up, thumbs down knowledge check. Thumbs up? Okay. Just want to make sure, because sometimes everybody's like, ooh, plugging stuff into the computer, it gets freaky. So, all right. So again, a lot of this stuff can be cheap and incredibly portable. The external mics, Again, you can use conventional mics, you put them through a mixer and put them into your computer. The Icicle is a really great way to do that. So we'll assume that you've captured audio. If you really want to, how many people have Macs and are using Apple? And how many people are using PCs? Okay, so it's about an even split. If you need to record, does everybody use Skype? How many people use Skype? Okay, one great tool that you can use is if you're using Skype to make phone calls through your computer and you've got a microphone set up like this, you can use something on a Mac called Audio Hijack Pro and record stuff straight with a software solution basically straight onto the computer. So you can do interviews over the internet, which can be really helpful. You can also use Audacity to record some of that stuff, but you have to make some changes. You can use Audacity on the PC to record information and for that to be your software solution. And that is a free program. There are more sophisticated things that you can use, but Audacity, frankly, is cheap and easy. Free is the way I go. So here's Audacity. Audacity basically has a play button, a record button. Here's your balances between left and right. This is a piece of an interview I did with Ann Ford. Here is a way that you can kind of, these are your clipping and editing tools. Here's a little scissors. And these are your sound waves right down here. After a while, after you hear things played back, you can actually figure out where you're saying and and things like that. And I can go in and I can clip out half of that stuff so you can make it sound broadcast quality very quickly and easily. It's actually gotten to the point where I actually notice when people say that much more because I've had to edit my own audio when I sit there and go, So but you get very good at clipping out the stuff you don't want to. So you can take audio that's you can make people sound a lot better than they are. Your audience appreciates it, you appreciate it, and it also clips down the time because people naturally say and ah when they're trying to think of the next thing that they're trying to say. In the sound waves, you can blow these up so you can get in there. You can even take out extra S's and everything else. And it's really easy. You basically would end up getting to the point where you can use this just like you would use a word processor. You just highlight whatever you want to cut out. You hit the clip symbol and it's done. We decided not to do this interactive just because it would be a little hard to do and give everybody a chance to play with the audio. So I'm sorry that we're not doing that live. There are many programs you can use for this. Adobe has a couple. Audacity, again, is for the PC and Mac, and it's free. GarageBand is also available right through the Mac. It's one of those programs that's Macs, and it's incredibly easy. Even for conferences and stuff like that, I've got a program on my iPad called Audio Note, where I can actually take notes and record audio at the same time. I can download the audio as an MP3, and I could post that to the web alone. And that'll record straight off the iPad. I've also, it's very easy. There's now the LiveScribe pen, which is also good if you're in a meeting or anything else because you can turn that on and you can even do pencasts. So you can have your notes and the audio that sync up absolutely exactly and upload that straight to the web. So if you're doing things like the poor people in Reading who aren't here but would like to hear the audio and see the notes at the same time if somebody's doing something, or can't be where you are at the same time, it's a great way to share that information out afterwards. Things to consider. If you're going to do a show, and particularly do more than one, you may want an intro. If we go back to looking at Audacity, this is one track, this is another, you can easily lay in a track of music underneath, and then you can do something called fading. You hit one of these buttons up here, and you can make this so the sound sort of goes off and tapers off while the other sound builds up, and it makes it sound all nifty and professional, and it takes you about 3 seconds to learn that tool. That's really called ducking with the fade in and fade out. You can do a set intro that you can then use and save that piece of audio and use it over and over and over again, and you just sort of clip it in. And you can do an outro too, which standardly is just that this show has been brought to you by Kellogg's. And you can have your contact information and everything more at the end of that. So that could be very good for branding and making things consistent through your show. Then you're going to want to think about distribution. If you're going to do something that's going to be sequential, submit all of that to the iTunes Store, also the Zune Marketplace with your feed. unless you're really talking about something vile, it's unlikely that they won't approve you for the Apple Store. That means that anybody with a portable device, and certainly with an iPod, can get your show on a consistent basis. You should also make sure that they can get the show right off your website, which is as easy as uploading your file to your website, placing a link, an HTML link, and then they can hit that and then just download it or listen to it streaming. Libsyn is a service which for $5 a month will make this process of syndicating your show very easy. Blueberry is also another service that will help you do this. Blueberry does insert ads and can actually generate ad revenue for your show, so it's something to consider over time. Resources. FeedBurner is a great way to, again, get that RSS feed up, and it also keep track of your stats of how many times people are downloading stuff from your website. One of the great books out there to explain all this podcasting stuff, particularly when you start hooking up wires, is Trick of the Podcasting Masters. It's probably about 4 years old now, and it's a little up to date in terms of some of the services like Odeo and some other places which you used to be able to use to publicize your podcast that are now not as current or still in business. But for the production point of view and how to get things noticed through newspapers and stuff, they've got great advice. The other thing to be really careful of when you're producing anything for the web is to make sure that you're not violating copyrights. We would all love to have Bruce Springsteen play for the background music for anything that we do, or use really great popular music. If you do not have permission and you don't own those rights, people will sue you. The RIAA is getting really strict about this, as we all know from Bye Bye Napster and everything else. So there's a lot of services out on the web. PodSafe Music Network has choices of everything from pop songs to just musical stuff to even classical music that you can download and use for free. And all they ask is that you just give them a credit and a link back on the website. So that's probably the simple and easiest and safest way to do it. Or, of course, if you've got a kindergartner who can play music or whatever else, you can do that too. But as long as they're not doing covers of Springsteen songs, you're probably fine. So, care and feeding of your audience. You're going to want to provide some information so they know what's in there. The web is absolutely great, but it indexes mostly text. It is not yet really indexing video and audio really well. So you're going to want to provide information. There are these nifty show note pads that are out there. Mostly if you go to podcasting conferences, you get these all for free. But it has your show name, episode title, intro items, show topics, and links, and it's a good way for you to plan out your show before you actually do it. It's not a bad format to look at. You're welcome to take a sheet here if you want sort of a template or whatever else at the end. But again, if you plan out what you've got, you can have that as the show notes that sit on your website. That also will generate web traffic because that's also the tags, and it tells everybody what actually is located in that text and what you're talking about. If you're going to do a regular podcast, try and keep to a schedule. I mean, it could be once a month, but if people expect that they're going to get new content, on the first of the month, that's awesome. If, you've been doing everything weekly and you don't warn your audience that you're going down to, once a month or signing off completely, you may get disappointed audience members or people who are disaffected. So if you have regular content, you're much more likely to build a more consistent audience. When you're putting up stuff, again, use keywords to help people find your resources. So if I'm going to do a podcast about learning disabilities, for instance, and this is a really good example. So when parents get really ratcheted up about their kids learning how to read, it's usually in about October and about January, February. And you can do a Google Trend search like we talked about this morning and actually see when these things have peaks and valleys in terms of attention. So I know if I'm going to do a podcast about dyslexia, the best time for me to do those is again September, October, and then around January, February when everybody's gotten their bad reading score grades and parents are going ballistic about it, because then I'm going to be timely with that content. And then making sure that I'm putting the adequate keywords and everything in the show notes will help people find that better. So you can time your content and place it up there so when people are more likely looking for it, they're going to find it. And promote your shows and everything else in other material. Put it in your email, put it in your blogs, put it on your Facebook page. You can also embed audio and video on your Facebook, so that's great. Here are quick and easy cheats. Animoto is a fantastic way. If you have slides from an event, you can go to Animoto. You can account, I think a paid account is $30 a year. You can put all your photos in there, take a piece of their music or a piece of music that you have licensed to, upload it, and it will do this fantastic animation where slides are coming in and going in and whatever. It's the best slideshow you've ever seen. And you can take that and then embed that on your website or whatever, and all you have to be able to do is upload a bunch of photographs. It's particularly good if you've got that dead time or you're doing promotions like everybody's got a table out here. That's a great video to have running in the background, and you can just loop it together, but it's something that's exciting and visually attractive. TalkShoe is a great way for people to call in and make a podcast out of a conference call. Everybody can call into a number and you can record that, and then you could use it afterwards. So if you've got a monthly conference call or something else, if somebody doesn't have the ability to record that directly, TalkShoe is not a bad way to go about that. And you can use it to basically have your own radio call-in show if you really want to. Blog Talk Radio is also a good resource if you want to run that sort of show. Audio Hijack Pro, again, will allow you to record incoming sounds into your computer. And TubeMogul is a fantastic thing. Steve told me that they've got a charge for it now, but it used to be absolutely free. You could sign up for free accounts at Blip TV and Vimeo and all these other places that YouTube that host video all over the web. You could upload stuff to TubeMogul and it would automatically take that video and plaster it out to all these different channels rather than you having to spend 20 minutes a shot uploading your video to all of these different sites to get it found. Plus it's got analytics to it. Steve, you were saying, because I know we were talking about this the other night, how much is the TubeMogul account these days?
It's expensive.
It's expensive, like $300.
Yeah, it's out of the range probably of most of the nonprofits.
So what, $300 a year or more than that, or?
Around $300 a month.
$300 a month. So that's expensive. So you may want to go back to the old.
It might be more than that. I have to check. It's
Well,
really
that's a dirty
ridiculous.
trick, because back
Very
in the old day
ridiculous.
was,
Very ridiculous.
this is what happens when you've been doing this for a while. You learn the old cheap hacking ways to get around all of this. But YouTube is a perfectly good and a legitimate channel to host all of your video. And you can create your own channel there as well. And because it's got very easy embeds, it's very easy to embed in other web pages and share it out. So video options. If you're going to produce video, iMovie and stuff on the Mac makes it incredibly easy to shoot video and to edit it, because again, it's a drag and drop approach and they all have very good manuals in there. Final Cut Pro is Mac's more advanced software, which gives me headaches, but people like Steve who do video all the time are really good at it. Adobe Premiere Elements works very well for the PC. And if you want more video editing software, you can always go to websites like this, Video Editing Software Review, Top 10 Reviews, and get a good sense of what sort of video editing software you use. What do you use, Steve?
Sony Vegas.
Sony Vegas. So how much did that set you back, just as an idea? 500. So, again, you can decide how much you want to spend. If you're going to do video, again, it's going to be a little more time consuming because the files are big and fat, because it's got audio and pictures going on at the same time. And you're going to have to spend a little more time editing that and making it look nifty and fancy. Trailers, you probably really do want an intro going into it. You're probably going to want credits at the end, and you are going to want to make sure that you're using copyright-free music and you're not violating any copyrights. Show notes, again, web still works by text, so publish your show notes right alongside the content if you can. And one thing that some people do, particularly with audio, is they've been using transcripts. It provides additional ADA access for people that otherwise couldn't access the content, which is nice, but it also provides you a lot of text, which provides you with a lot of opportunities for search engine optimization. So, again, this is just an idea. This is a Google Trend Report, which we talked about a little bit before, for learning disabilities, Asperger's, and everything else. You can see peaks and valleys of attention, what's getting more. You can break it down by regions and everything, and figure out what your traffic is and which things are getting more traffic based on whatever you're doing, and then gear some content around that. Is all of this overwhelming yet? Remember that for each rule that we promulgate, there's ways to break it. There are ways to go ahead and do something different. Stretch and figure out how to be entertaining, how to make your messages important. You each have really important stories and are doing really important work to make this world a better place, but you need to be able to go out and tell those other people. And when you're creating your content, ask yourself, how is this helping you? Why are you doing an audio podcast or a video podcast? Is this a useful channel for your message? Are you doing something so it can be available even when you're not? Are you helping other people in your organization, or are you looking for this to be public facing? And both are perfectly legitimate. Are there other types of outreach that are going to work better? There are sometimes, a simple email may work better than having somebody watch some audio or video content. Or you may really want them to see something, in which case a video is really important. But again, look at your strategy and tactics. Look to fish where the fish are. Look to figure out why you want to do these things and answer those questions before you decide, I'm going to have this show and it's going to be fantastic and we're going to talk about this, and then you run out of things to talk about in the first 10 minutes because you spent a lot of time and effort and learning to try and get somewhere, and then if you don't have anything to say at the end or it's not working out the way you want to, you don't even know where to go tweak. So one great thing to keep in mind too is there's this great website called Help a Reporter Out. And I think this is one of those unsung things a lot of people don't know about. You can go and sign up for this website and they will send you an email 2 or 3 times a day of reporters looking for sources for stories. Interestingly enough, I fed a couple of these things to my poor spouse, and he ended up in Parents Magazine this month, talking about yeast infections during pregnancy, which, since he's an OBGYN, is important. But he's like, yeah, here's another thing. But it took him no more than a 5-minute call on the phone with this reporter who now contacts him fairly frequently, and it makes his hospital ridiculously happy that he's showing up in major magazines for, basically not doing very much. So, it's great. It's a good reputation management thing to do, and it's a way to get your side of the story out. And it's a great way to actually keep track of what reporters are actually looking to write stories on. So it's a good way to keep your ear to the ground as well. But let's talk about measuring results and more. Google Analytics. If you guys hopefully all have analytics packages on your websites. If not, Google Analytics is free. A little piece of code you put on your website, nobody sees it, and you get all sorts of amazing numbers. So you can figure out where people are coming from. Are they coming from directly to your website by typing in the URL? Are they coming from looking from you on a search engine? Or are they coming from referring sites? Bounce rate means how many people are coming to the first page of your website and then leaving, which if you're running a blog is awesome. If you're running another website where you want people to dig in and dig down, having a high bounce rate then is not necessarily good because they're seeing and going, not what I was looking for, and I've moved on. You can see visitors, you can see what browsers they're using. This is a good thing. If your website is not mobilely friendly and you find that people are trying to get there from the iPhone, this is the time to become mobilely friendly because people are trying to get to your website and not finding what they need. You can figure out what pages have the most hits and what people are looking here. I think I told you that LensCrafter story at one point. You can see that people are still coming to my website and still looking at me chewing out LensCrafters. So there's different sites and everything. It can give you a lot of information, sometimes almost more information than you need. And this is a fairly bad picture, but you can see that there are people coming to my website from all over the world. And by the size of the dots, it's how many people are there. But the fact that this is obviously the U.S., but the fact that there are people in China listening to my show is incredibly flattering. But again, if you want people in China are listening to your show and you're expecting them to show up at your estuary cleanup on Saturday, that's going to be a problem. Unless they're really, really dedicated, in which case then you're doing something really right because they're taking plane flights from the other side of the globe. Again, it's about relevancy. What's relevant to you and your organization? What's relevant to your audience? Things to remember. Again, these things may not immediately generate a lot of traffic. If people tell you that they can produce a viral video for you, they shouldn't be talking to you because they should be basically on Letterman and everything else. Nobody knows exactly what's going to go viral. The fact that most of the big viral videos are things like cats jumping out of boxes. You can watch Tosh.0 to see a lot of different viral videos, but nobody necessarily knows what's viral. And if somebody is promising to create you a viral video, they're lying to you. So concentrate on producing really good and valuable content first, and if it goes viral and you end up on Oprah, mazel tov. So, look at it as generating traffic over time. Again, it's going to be useful if it's current, if it uses your human voice, if it makes people understand you and your organization and what you're trying to achieve better. If you're able to tell that human story and make it engaging and tell other people in a meaningful way why you care about what you do every day, then you're doing a really good job. Make it compelling, and if you can, make it fun. Again, the fact that Mike Castle's at the end of that video for Analtech is getting a ridiculous hits because they made it fun and they made it silly. And also, keep in mind of all the content you share on the web, make it shareable. There's quick ways, this shareable widget and other ways with little links on your website. Make it easy for people to propagate the information that you create. Because the more they share it out to other people, the more attention basically you're going to get. The more you keep something locked up, the less likely it is to spread. It's all about maintaining those really nice conversations with people, making human connections, and really making them care. And that's the bulk of what I've got to say. So,
By Whitney Hoffman, CEO of Hoffman Digital.
I'm sure that there are questions.
Yeah, we take a few questions.
Drive you crazy. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about web resources for measurable results? You talked about Google Analytics, but any other thoughts about that? Because a lot of us have to do a lot of that.
Okay, so what kind of analytics package do you have on your website right now?
Well, we have Google Analytics
Uh-huh.
For the purpose of being able to see who's coming to the website
Mhm.
who they're looking at. But in terms of other projects, other maybe freeware that's available for analyzing other things, do you have any suggestions?
I guess I'm wondering what the other things are that you want to look at, because again, Google Analytics will tell you exactly what people are looking for, and you can dig down into that. I mean, I can tell city by city who's actually come to my website, which can be incredibly helpful. So part of it is how much can you dig in there? If you find that the referring websites that you have, you can see exactly where your traffic's coming from, then it's like, okay, why are they sending a lot of traffic to me that way? A lot of it is going to be digging into the meat of probably the analytics that you already have rather than looking for something else. You sort of, and that again is, what do you do with the data points once you have them? How do you make the most of that information that you've got? Again, it's surprising to see some popular or generating a lot of traffic, and sometimes other things that you think are much better quality don't, which goes to show me that, I guess I'm really bad at guessing at what other people want to hear. But I think part of it is looking at those statistics over time and trying to draw big, broad conclusions about what can you do and what can you do better, or what are people looking for primarily. Sometimes, there's easy ways to do things, like if you have an email list, one of the cheap and easiest ways to do something is if you've got a Gmail account or set up a Google account of anything, you can get into Google Docs, and there's a little thing where you can do a form. So instead of using SurveyMonkey or any of the more expensive survey software, you can create a Google form, and you can send that out to people by embedding a form in an email. You can embed it in a web page. You can have it just as a live form on the web. And you can ask people who are coming to your website, take a few minutes and fill out our survey about what kind of information they're looking for, and just ask them a bunch of questions that you want. What's great is when anybody fills that out, it timestamps the data and puts it all on an Excel spreadsheet for you. So basically, you've got all your data already collaborated, and depending on what you've asked, particularly if it's numerical stuff, you can just take that stuff and crunch it. But it's incredibly useful. And because it's very instantaneous and it's very lightweight, and you can even change the skin so you can make it look prettier if you're embedding it on your blog or something, you tend to get a lot of really quick responses. I mean, we took some paper forms that we used to have people fill out. This was stupid. It was for the book fair at the school. You used to take weeks to get teachers to fill out certain things and sign up for different things. We did it as a Google form, and it came into their email. We got 86% of people filling it out in the first 24 hours. It was a beautiful thing.
It's called Google Forms?
Google Forms. It's just embedded in Google Docs. If you just, and it's really simple. But it's one of the quick and easiest and again free ways to get that survey information about what do people expect. Just ask people questions. Ask them what they want from you. Because, again, you can better serve their needs if you want, because otherwise you're just guessing. You'd ask your kids what they want for Christmas. They may not get it all the time, and that may still be the answer for your community. They may not get everything they want from you. They may want a new pony. But, but at the exact same time, if there's things that you can do or things that they can tell you that they'd like you to do better, or, they'd like more information about events, or they'd like to hear from you, bi-monthly versus monthly or whatever else, that's a good way to solve those problems. And I think if you're really interested in web analytics, there's a couple really good books. There's Web Analytics in an Hour a Day by Ivanish, oh goodness, I can't even pronounce his last name. But if you look up Web Analytics in an Hour a Day, it's a great book that'll help you get a better sense on the analytics and what you're measuring. Again, Google Webmaster Tools are terrific, SEO and then MOZ. And I think a lot of it is about trying to take all these points and figuring out what's most meaningful and what seems to be popular. A lot of people do A/B testing in email in terms of doing different titles and seeing what gets the most number of open rates. If you're going to send out 2 emails, do 2 things and see what seems to have the bigger response. There's another little program called Crazy Egg where you can upload that on your website and figure out what the hot spots are and what people are really clicking on. And again, sometimes the change in a button color or whatever, you'll find that it just draws more attention, which is particularly good, again, if you're looking for donations or other things on your website, knowing what people are actually looking at. There's sometimes you have to be able to take a look at your web page and actually step back, even from across the room, and see what draws your attention. If it just looks like it's busy and you can't figure out what to do there, maybe you have to figure out, is there a way to streamline the information or arrange it in such a way so you're highlighting what you want people to pay attention to? Because too much information, it's like going to the grocery store. There are only, 85,000 different salad dressings? I'm not even sure someday, if I want French or Italian or ranch, let alone the 25 different varieties, I'm supposed to choose one. So, sometimes too much information. So there's a real balance there, and I think part of it is, trying to look at a display, trying to look at your website with a critical eye. Ask somebody, who doesn't have a stake in it in your organization, not the guy putting up the content. And have a look at it and see what they think and see if they can find the information they're looking for. Ask your mom to try and find something on your website and see if they can find it. And if they can't, that's a sign that maybe it's not organized the way it needs to be. I'm thinking there's a web tool in particular called Wild Apricot, which works particularly to try and maximize stuff for nonprofits. I'm trying to, the Red Cross always does a good job with all of their campaigns. They've done text campaigns, so you can donate as quickly as possible. You hear the promo on the website or anywhere else, through Facebook or anything else, you can go immediately to a way to take action and make a donation. Goodness, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Part of it is, I think, look at people who you like or who you've seen who you think do an impressive job. Like I know there were people talking about the Chesapeake waterfront. If you think the Chesapeake waterfront is doing a really good job, I have no idea what their financial situation is. You might want to look at the competition between your website and theirs, let's say for the number of hits, through something like compete.com and just see what the volume of the difference is too. It gives you an idea of how much attention somebody else is getting. And it lets you do some quick cross comparisons about what are they doing and what are they doing differently, and then looking at the different websites. I was amazed, there's that website Charity Water that does an absolutely great job with outreach, a lot of social media stuff. They've raised a lot of money to do these wells. I've gone and I've looked at their IRS stats, and I'm not overly impressed by the amount of money that they use on promotion versus the amount that they're actually turning into their projects. But they've done a really good job at outreach and a really good job of raising money. So, yes, they're doing a good job of raising money. I'm doing a good job of spending it the most effective way, but that's why it's another point. So again, I think part of it's trying to figure out, is it solely a fundraising goal? What can you have? Is there an event? Is there a passive way, like, essentially a donation button or a tip jar that you can get passive donations that you don't have to work hard for? Because with any nonprofit, it's all about how much money goes into actually raising the money versus how much money do you actually get. And part of it's trying to maximize those opportunities. Can you do something that, let's say, is essentially low cost, like a project-based learning thing at a school, and you get the kids and their parents donating something to the organization in turn, and it's a mutually beneficial kind of thing? Is that a way to do something that's a little more innovative and out of the box? Maybe. So part of it, I think, sometimes it's the creativity. Again, I was thinking about all the different things that you could do for the rain garden thing, just because that captured my imagination this morning. It could be a citizen-driven thing. You could have cross-pollination with garden clubs and schools and everything else. I mean, there's lots of little ways. You could hand out seed packets. That's not necessarily all that expensive, at Home Depot on a Saturday or something. There's lots of little things that might fuel donations or other things like that, or fuel awareness that are relatively low cost, but just require doing something that's both sort of, educational and an outreach thing, sort of hand in hand. And part of it's just, what would I want to know and what story am I trying to sell? And if you have a really good story to sell, then try and figure out the best way to sell that story to the people who are going to care the most. Where are you going to be in a place to convert, right? So if I'm looking for stereo equipment, I'm going to go to the stereo equipment store. If I'm looking for plants, I'm going to go to Home Depot or Richardson's or some other place to get plants. And if you're there and you're going to sell me seeds over Richardson's, assuming that they're going to do the good guy thing and let you do that, that's awesome. I'm more likely to put a donation in a pail or buy stuff from you necessarily than do something else, because I've just got an educational experience that tells me that this is much more important while I'm already in the process of doing something like, putting in a garden or something else. I would worry less about writing to a particular educational level than write to your audience. And to a certain extent, if you're writing to, let's say, a group of your fellow scientists and people who are already aware of this, then you're writing a whole different news than if you're writing towards the general public. And even if you're writing towards the general public, talk down to people. It's not all just about simplifying your sentences and not using 3-syllable words. Make good, intelligent, and passionate arguments. Read Made to Stick. I mean, again, I think that's one of the best books out there about how to boil down your message. I think if every teacher actually read that book, they could sell history the same way you sell aspirin or Tide laundry detergent, because it's all about really bringing that message home. It's finding that compelling story and saying it. So for example, I'm just trying to, again, this is like, okay, on the fly, quick advertising campaign, and again, it's trying to do that. But, do you know how much water ends up just running off into running off into our water supply that could be saved and really used for useful purposes? Simple things like just using these 4 plants in your front garden will do an amazing job of capturing that rainwater. Or how you can save, $200 a year by putting in a rain barrel on your downspouts and using that for your vegetables. Enrich your children's life with fresh vegetables and, deal with the childhood obesity problems while you're building, and build a garden. It's an educational opportunity for everybody in the community. You can just spin these things off, and it doesn't necessarily need to be talking down to people. But again, the underlying message in all of this is what's in it for your audience, not just what's in it for you. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is, all right, I've got bills to pay this month. This is what I need. That's fine. Your audience does not necessarily care what you need. They want to know what you're doing for them. So the case is, we are making the Delaware watershed a greater place for our whole community to spend time, and for you in particular, because this is what's going on. Come join us in helping the community get better. So again, if you make it something that somebody wants to be a part of, and it's an organization, and you make it an emotional attachment and everything, you're going to be much better off than worrying about whether or not you've written it on a 5th or a 6th grade level. Make good and passionate arguments. Tell people why you care and why they should care. And again, we all have fundraising goals. We all have things that we need. Everybody needs a paycheck. Everybody's got things that they are interested in what's in it for them. And so you have to be able to take that other side of the equation and make the case for them and why they want to engage. How much content do you want to produce? How much of it can you cross-post? Because you can cross-post blog posts, as notes onto your Facebook page, so you can kind of just do it once. Again, it's how much traffic are you getting off your Facebook page? If you're really happy with the traffic and you're getting a lot of interactions and stuff there, you may not need a blog. But a blog may generate additional SEO and additional attention for your website. Google loves fresh content. Google loves tagged content. And sometimes a lot of that doesn't necessarily happen with the standard text on your website. So it gives you another opportunity to run sort of like an online magazine about what you're doing and a little bit more, you can keep content up to date a little more frequently than people tend to do with your regular website. So it's mostly about freshness of content, new stuff, a little more SEO traffic. Those are the really good things about a blog. You can use your Facebook page to link certainly to articles that you find interesting and provide that as value to your community. You can embed videos and all of those other things. You can do that too. It's just a question of what's the breadth of your audience. And if you're finding that Facebook is working for you, that's awesome. A blog may not be everybody's thing. It really is quick and easy, lightweight website to run. And again, I think it's just a question of the freshness of the material really when it comes right down to it. Another question from the back row.
Just a real quick question or the comment on the reading and writing level.
Mm-hmm.
We've developed a number of online environmental education projects, and we really, primarily in Florida with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection,
Mm-hmm.
and we really kind of struggled with some of these questions about reading and writing level. And when we started talking to teachers and educators, they were basically saying, look, unless your audience is, third graders or fourth graders, write to that, about that 8th grade level. Because if you've got content that's going to be used in schools for 5th and 6th graders, if your writing is okay, they're going to run into words that they're going to stumble upon, maybe not understand, but they do that all the time. They're going to be forced.
Vocabulary enriching opportunity.
Right, and they're going to be forced to go to a glossary or a dictionary, and we always include online glossaries with our project, so they can go to those glossaries and look up that word and hopefully understand what it is that they're, what you're presenting to them. But again, unless you're dealing with that, again, 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders, pretty much everybody above that can consume a lot of the same content. The difference in writing style may be the difference between, say, if you're writing more like a USA Today as opposed to, say, a New York Times. And there are very different, writing styles in terms of USA Today version of the news being much shorter, much more consumable as opposed to the 1,000-word article in the New York Times.
Sure. I mean, there's a question of depth and everything else. Do you want people to get the general gist of what's going on, or do you want them to dig deeper? There's a lot of ways to sort of put the short up front on the front page of your website. You probably want a short article on the front page of your website, not your doctoral thesis. There are great little programs right inside. Obviously, if you go to Mashable and you pick up either the Twitter guide or the Facebook guide, it'll outline all of that. But right through Facebook, when you're looking at all your preferences and everything in the meantime, it'll say, do you want to post something to notes? You can integrate your blog right in there, and it has a way you can put your feed right in there, and it'll just cross-post, and it's awesome. And if you look up, Twitter to Facebook, there are like 2 or 3 different apps where you just put in your information, and it'll just cross-post it. So again, that's one of those things. Some people look at their Twitter audiences and their Facebook audiences as being sacrosanct, and they handcraft messages with loving care for each one. For me, I go with the lazy approach, and it just cross-posts because it saves a lot of time, and the audiences are significantly overlapped as far as I'm concerned, that it works out okay. And if somebody's had to read it twice, that's what you put up with when you know me.
I actually just wanted to mention that Microsoft Word has a tool that you can activate that does tell you what your document reading level is, and you just have to go to
good.
tools and turn that on. And then when you run it, it shows up just like how it does the spell check, and then it'll show you what it'll say like grade 7, about grade 12, like things like college, is grade 17, grade 18, things like that. You'll know if you need to. It's based on the length of the sentence.
Right, and editing is a beautiful thing. Hand the copy around to other people in the office and figure out whether or not they're really reading it or if they're falling asleep. And if they're falling asleep, then you need to take another work at the letter. That's it. I mean, I think part of it is everybody wants to make their content as compelling as possible. And again, it's about telling good stories and making people care and everything else. You know, they had this long experiment that the Hughes brothers did, where if you did a newsletter and you were talking about, you know, the enormity of the hunger problem in Africa and sort of talking about it in generic terms, and then asking for the ask at the end, they got less of a response if they said, look at poor Rokia, who, you know, only gets one meal a day, and it personalizes it, and you care about that one kid. You know, help other children like Rokia by giving us, you know, $20 today and whatever. They got a much higher response rate because it personalized it to one person. Because you think you can help one person, you're not sure you can help all of hunger in Africa. Like, you know, like I said before, I'm not sure I can save the Delaware Estuary or the Chesapeake Bay by myself, because it seems like an enormously big problem, and I'm not sure where to dig in and start. So part of the difficulty is you've got to give people something to do in a place where they can dig in and start. You know, where is the shovel, you know, the proverbial shovel that you can give them to where they can make a difference? And once you've got them to care, you've got to make sure you hit them up with something to do, which donations is a really good thing to do. Or you may really want them to do things like come out to an event or participate or spread the word. And you have to, and that's when they're making things easily shareable, you know, forward this on to a friend. Even if you can't come, you know, do this. Make very specific asks of people, and they're much more likely to do it. You know, because you've actually told them what you wanted. I mean, how many of us, particularly as you're getting older, do people say, what do you want for Christmas? And you sit there and go, I don't know. You know, but if you give somebody a list, you're more likely to get the stuff that you want.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation by the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. For more information, visit delawareestuary.org or call 800-445-4935. We produced this program in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at professionalpodcasts.com. For everyone at the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.